Yeah.
All right. So our Torah reading is Vayishlach. Jacob is on his way home. The end of our Torah reading last week was that he parts company with Lavan in a very tense kind of confrontation, and he's on his way, and he comes comes closer to home. He traverses hundreds of miles. He's now close to home, and he's really at the border where he knows that his brother has kind of also, established his own estates and holdings. So he sends messengers to his brother. He's proactive about this, and he tries to be nice to his brother, and he sends him gifts, and he says, he messages to try to make peace with his brother. And then, of course, his brother shows up with 400 armed men. So he freaks out and splits up his camp so that somebody will survive. Hopefully, if one camp is attacked, the other camp will have time to run away. So he's really thinks that this is very dangerous. And he has another very, very profound experience during the night when he's all by himself. And he wrestles with some mysterious being. Turns out to be an angel of God. And this is the famous, wrestling match of Jacob, where the angel and Jacob fight to a draw. The angel wants to leave. He says, it's the morning. It's time for me to leave. And Jacob says, I'm not going to leave unless you bless me. And he gets his name changed to be Israel, Yisrael, because you have wrestled, you have struggled with God, and you have and with people, and you have prevailed. So that's Kisarita im Elokim ve'im Adam batuchal. So that's now the additional name that Jacob has. The next morning, he encounters his brother, and guess what? His brother is all, peaches and cream. He hugs him. He says, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you. Don't worry about anything. Don't even, you don't have to try to, bribe me with all of these, animals and riches. I have plenty on my own. I'm doing very well. So, let's just be friends. Why don't you come with me and hang out, so that I can be your host for a while. You'll be my guest." So Jacob says, well, it's going to take me a long time to get there. I'll see you later, which he doesn't. But instead, he makes his way home. And then the Torah portion, as they come into the land of Canaan itself, we have the very, very distressing story of Dinah and the rape of Dinah, and then the massacre at Shechem. The brothers Shimon and Levi massacre the town of Shechem because the prince, or the son of the ruler of Shechem, has had his way with Dinah, and they're outraged, and through lying and subterfuge, they make it so that they can wipe them all out. So it's disgusting. I've written about it many, many times. And Jacob is horrified. The sons are unrepentant, and that's where the story ends. And of course, Dinah has nothing to say. Later generations have looked at this in many different ways. And of course, in modern times, with the feminist revolution, there's a lot more attention paid to what's going on with the women and what's going on with Dinah. And the Red Tent, made a big splash years ago as a kind of a fictional midrash type novel, to deal with that kind of stuff. And then we have Jacob is again given the name Israel directly by God, and Jacob is told, "You are the guy." And we also have his his sons, these very righteous people, the Torah tells us they really have on the side, they're worshiping idols. So Jacob has a job to clean out his own household from all of these idols. Remember, we talked a little bit about idols that Rachel herself took from Lavan, but here it's just mentioned, as a matter of fact, that there were strange idols that the sons of Jacob were worshiping. Not a nice reflection on them in that respect either. And then finally, we have a very short mentioning of Isaac's death. And here we have something a little significant. Who buries Isaac? Esav and Jacob together. So the Torah specifically mentions that they engage in this, filial obligation together, which would seem to hint that at least they somehow were able to cooperate with each other. And then the rest of the ending of the Torah portion is to give us an extensive listing of Esav's generations and the rulers of Esav's clans. He's got his own extensive people called Edom, and they are doing very well. Right, that's the end of our story in our Torah reading. So this is, we need to bear in mind, because now our Torah, our Haftarah is found on page 222 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. In a Tanakh, if you just have a regular Tanakh, it's the prophet Obadiah, and it's the first chapter of Obadiah. It's also the last chapter of Obadiah, because Obadiah only is a book of one chapter. The entire book is 21 verses. So that's the Haftarah. It's called the Haftarah for the Sfardim, but Ashkenazim have adopted it also, although there's, you can look in some lists, it says the Ashkenazim read this other Haftarah, but we're not. We're reading Obadiah. So Obadiah chapter 1 is where we start, and we'll see right away what well, not right away, but we'll get there, what Obadiah's connection is to our Torah reading. We assume, based on the content of this very short text, we assume that Obadiah lived in somewhat after, a little bit after the destruction of the first temple and the exile of the tribe of Judah from Judea. So sometime a little bit after 586 BCE. Okay, so that's where we place him. We're not quite sure where he is. Is he exiled? Does he stay in the land of Israel? We don't know. But he has, this is his prophecy. So is somebody gonna read for us, please? Anybody?
I will.
Anybody have it? Audrey, you said you're going to read it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. The prophecy of Obadiah.
Right. And as the note mentions, I think, does the note mention? Yes. The word prophecy here is the word chazon. Chazon is a vision.
Okay.
Right.
We have received tidings from the Lord, and an envoy has been sent out among the nations. Up, let us rise up against her for battle. Thus said my Lord God concerning Edom, I will make you.
So that's the first chapter. That's the first sentence, right? That's the first verse.
Okay.
Right. So, and in the Hebrew, the last phrase is the first phrase. So it goes the vision of Obadiah, right? Thus said my Lord God concerning Edom. Okay, and then we have received tidings from the Eternal, and then an envoy has been sent out among the nations. Let's rise up against her, meaning Edom, in battle. Right? So this is a statement, a proclamation directed not to Israel at this point. He's a Jewish prophet, and he's speaking to the foreign nation of Edom. Okay, so as I mentioned before, Edom, that's Esav. Okay, but this is hundreds of years later. So Esav has become, even in our Torah reading, a prosperous nation. They are an identifiable group. And what do we hear in this particular first verse? They're in trouble. Right? There's going to be, from God, Ovadia hears that people are collecting themselves to, I got the news, I heard through the grapevine, that, forget it. Edom is now going to be attacked by hostile forces. Okay, so clearly the first connection that we have is, here's a treatment of Edom, right? What kind of treatment? We'll have to wait and see. But it's a much, later historical period. It's not the individual man named Edom, Esav, but it's the people Edom, just like we are the people Israel, not the individual person Jacob Israel, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
But it'll probably get answered as we go on, which is why is Obadiah, excuse me, concerned with this, with another group of people?
That you will find out.
We will find out. That is my core
important.
question.
That's right. Why are we
What's it to
treasuring,
us,
right? What's it to us? We had that whole question last. How did we end up preserving all this stuff? And why is it of interest to us? Why is it crucial to us? And now especially, okay, so good. So if a prophet harangues Israel, at least it's, has to do with Israel. What about this situation? Let's go.
I will make you least among nations. You shall be most despised. Your arrogant heart has seduced you. You who dwell in clefts of the rock, in your lofty abode, you think in your heart, who can pull me down to earth? Should you nest as high as the eagle? Should your eyrie be lodged among the stars? Even though there, I will pull you down, declares the Lord.
Okay, so God is threatening Edom and saying, you have no escape. Right? It doesn't matter how powerful you think you are, how happy you are with what you've got. You can try to climb the highest, cliffs. I will pull you down. I'm gonna, get you. And I guarantee I will make you least among the nations. Okay. In these verses, do we have any echoes to any of the story, the original, story of the, that started this whole development as it came later on, the beginnings of this story? Do we have any echoes of the Torah readings last week and this week?
The relationship between Jacob and Esau. I mean, they're, it's a both, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember last week's Torah reading, but the general storyline of this is all predicated on identifying Edom with Esau. And if you don't have that, I don't know, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, was Edom like an ally of Israel's or something that they expected this friendship?
So that's a good point. We'll find out. The answer, and the short answer is apparently yes, and it didn't work out so well.
So then it's reading backwards. I've been looking ahead a little bit. It's what we do later. Like I've always felt it weird about this identification of Esau with Edom.
No, well, that identification per se is not on a national. That's not any weirder than identifying the children of Israel with Jacob.
Yeah, I get that.
Genealogical development. That's founding fathers and so on.
But we didn't we didn't hate on like the British, like the mother country for the most part. And like here, like, Asaph, who seemed like an okay enough guy, and some, maybe like,
Right,
not
right.
exactly the, ideal brother relationship, but he wasn't like, he doesn't seem as evil as then we kind of make by that he becomes by casting back what we feel about Edom, or
Right. So that's what
so it
we talked about it before, and we just have to keep on reminding ourselves that's part of the tension of putting these two stories together, because the biblical story on the face of it has Edom, Esav, as an innocuous or even a friendly brother.
seems like Huss
He
Cartwright.
he has this anger, but 20 years later he's gotten over it.
Sorry.
Was that?
I keep getting a notification, so I might disappear, but
All right.
yeah,
He's
exactly.
gotten over it. He's made peace with his brother. That's a beautiful opening scene of our Torah reading, is that he's fine with his brother. He says, "I'm okay. I'm gonna let bygones be bygones." So that, and the end of the Torah reading again sort of just says, "Here's this group that is our neighbors. They're our neighbors. They're like Mexico or Canada. They're our neighbors geographically. They're right next to us, and they're a thriving people, and we're a thriving people." So the Torah reading on its face has gotten past the initial tension, and Esav is not a bad guy in the Torah reading, right? Edom is not a bad people. Esav is not a bad guy. Later on, the Torah will say, "Don't hate Edom." Right? They're your neighbors. They're your cousins, right? But now we are, as I say, some 600 years later, in terms of the thinking of the whether however you want to date the early Genesis stories, in terms of the telling of the story for Ovadia, we are now 700 years later, and the reality is completely different. The reality is that he is pouring out God's wrath against Edom. Edom is the worst of the worst, right? So that's like I said, that's part of the tension of putting these two readings together.
Yeah, I don't, just to say, I don't see an echo, a connection.
So the connection is simply, we're talking about the same family. We're talking about,
Well, yes, that's obvious, but
and
I
so now we're
don't,
talking about, look at what happened to these two families. So what happened to that peacemaking that was done once upon a time? That's that question in the background, because
I
here
see.
what we have is something that is, as we will see, a betrayal.
I see. Okay.
But in terms of some echoes, we have, for instance, the idea, I have made you, what does it say here? I will make you the least of among nations, right? It says katan, which is the smallest or the youngest, right? So in a certain sense, there's a little bit of a, you strive to be a big shot. You wanted to be the firstborn. You wanted to be a world power. You wanted to be taken, seriously and be feared for your might and so on. You have thought you were really, really hot stuff. No, I'm going to make you, verse 2, I will make you, you shall be most despised. That word despised, bazui, is exactly what the Torah says that Esav did about the birthright when he sold it for a bowl of red lentil soup. That he despised, he dismissed. Vayivez, it's the same word, et habchora. So there's a kind of a, as we will see, there's a kind of a poetic justice going on. Now you're going to really finally just be, you were, showing contempt for these things. You're going to be the one that people will have contempt for. Okay, let's go 5.
If If thieves were to come to you, marauders by night, they would steal no more than they needed. If vintagers came to you, they would surely leave some gleanings. How utterly you are destroyed.
Right. So
How-
you could, or you could say, but in contrast, how utterly you are destroyed. In other words, there's even honor among thieves. Thieves, I mean, I don't know, this doesn't ring very true to me that the thieves will only take what they need. But that's the rhetorical, sarcastic
I mean,
point
is
here.
it like you're so pathetic they won't they'll
They-
take mercy on you?
No, in general terms, there's always something left over. Even when people come to maraud and to steal and so on, there's always something left over in the end. They take what they want, but they leave plenty left. You will not have anything left.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
This is the prophecy that you will be so totally devastated. There won't be, scorched earth. There won't be anything left. This is all part of this, threat and anger.
All
And of
right.
course, we have these words again. We talk about thievery, right? If thieves would come to you, they would just take what they need. Of course, Esau accused Jacob of being a thief, right? Jacob came and stole, his birthright. Well, guess what? You will be so thoroughly, taken, washed out. Thieves will look good. Okay. 6.
How thoroughly rifled is Esau, how ransacked his hordes. All your allies turned you back at the frontier. Your own confederates have duped and overcome you. Those who ate your bread have planted snares under you. He is bereft of understanding.
Okay, so let's stop again. And any kind of, again, faint kind of rhymes and echoes?
I mean, it's just more of this. I mean, it's just keeps doubling
Well,
down.
here it's also saying you think you have allies and they will betray you.
Ah,
You think that you have people who are going to back you up. You have an alliance all lined up to come and destroy Israel. Guess what? Or to take advantage of Israel's destruction. Remember, we're talking about post the destruction of the first temple, and Israel is kind of wide open for exploitation. Well, guess what? You're going to be, what's the word? You're going to find out that you were duped. And of course, duping is again one of the questions, the central questions of the original story, right? Who's been fooling whom? Well, guess what? Now you're going to be fooled. You're going to be fooled. You're going to think that there are people that are going to help you as in your campaign. No way. And you don't even understand it. You have no clue. You are bereft of understanding. You have no clue how bad off you are. 8.
in that day, declares the Lord, I will make the wise vanish from Edom, understanding from Esau's mount. Your warriors shall lose heart, O Teman, and not a man on Esau's mount shall survive the slaughter. For the outrage to your brother Jacob.
Okay, so just before we get to that part, that's the part that we have to then now, finally, this is the answer to everybody's questions. What's this all about? But he says, that's it. Your whole territory, everybody that you think is planted in strongholds and in secure places. No, none of these places will be safe, and you won't even know how to deal with anything, right? And then back and forth between Esau and Edom as the two names. You won't know what to do. You won't know how to survive. Okay, why is this now happening? Okay, why the anger? Why this, verse after verse of bitter, vituperation? Verse 10.
For the outrage to your brother Jacob, disgrace shall engulf you, and you shall perish forever. On that day when you stood aloof, when aliens carried off his goods, when foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were as one of them. How could you gaze with glee on your brother that day, on his day of calamity? How could you gloat over the people of Judah on that day of ruin? How could you loudly jeer on a day of anguish? How
Okay,
could you?
let's stop for a second. So now we get, in general terms, what's bothering Ovadia and what's bothering God. So this is specifically about the destruction of the temple. If you remember, last week was it, or 2 weeks ago, I read to you Psalm 137. 137, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept. And then at the end we say, Edom, God will pay you back. God will pay you back for helping out all the people that destroyed us, that killed our babies, that exiled us, and you. So this comes, you help them out, right? So this comes back to this. So first of all, that's the outrage. That's the outrage, is that instead of being an ally to us, you decided you're going to have allies that are going to be more worth it for you, right? And you're going to take advantage of all of their power to pile on, right? To pile on to the destruction that these other, Assyria, Babylon, right? All these big empires, you're just like a little medium state, right? But you're gonna take advantage. You're gonna get in there also and add another little kick after we're down, and then you come in and gleefully give another kick. So this is where where Ovadia gives God's expression of, how could you do this, right? And the word is used, mechamas achicha Yaakov. Here the translation is outrage, but Hamas is used, we have the word used back in the flood story, that the world was destroyed, except for Noah and his family. The world was destroyed because the world was filled with Hamas, right? Is it a coincidence that we have this group today? I don't know. But Hamas is like violent theft and abuse of people. So that's here. Outrage is just a very general thing, but the theft part is important, because again, that's what, that original Esav, he was so burnt up about the theft, and now you are the ones who are guilty on such a bigger scale and on such a more horrible scale. You are the ones who are guilty of betraying your own brothers, right? Your own cousins. How could you do that? How could you not be moved to be on our side instead of on their side? So this, and we're going to get, there's again a powerful kind of rolling rhetoric here that we're going to keep on seeing. But back to something that Jennifer sort of mentioned. You wouldn't get outraged like this about Edom had you not expected that Edom was going to be your friend. So that's part of the pain and the connection to the previous story, to the early story. Because the early story is a story of reconciliation. The early story is supposed to be that we made peace with each other, and that we can live side by side, and we can bury our dead together. We can bury our common ancestor together. We're family. We're different, but we're family. So the shock that Ovadia is expressing on behalf of God, and the anger to punish Esav, is precisely because there was an expectation that Esav was a good guy in the national sense, that the original biblical story should have continued and developed with that heritage as a shared heritage. And that's the sticking point here, right? That reconciliation was worthless in the long run. And then it turns it all back into, oh, so maybe that reconciliation wasn't a reconciliation. Right now, of course, it's unfair because we're talking about an individual and then we're talking about hundreds of years later. But in the national consciousness, that's what it then becomes. It becomes then, so forget it. You've always been, enemies of ours. You've always hated us. Even when you said you didn't hate us, you hated us. Right? So this is the bitter anger that's being expressed here. Let's keep going now with verse 13.
How could you enter the gate of my people on its day of disaster? Gaze in glee with the others on its misfortune, on its day of disaster, and lay hands on its wealth on its day of disaster. How could you stand at the passes to cut down its fugitives? How could you betray those who fled on that day of anguish? As you did, so shall it be done to you. Your conduct shall be requited. Yes, against all nations, the day of the Lord is at hand.
Okay, so we have here contrast of two different kinds of days. In the Hebrew, we have it, and you can, right, you've noticed there's this like repetition, the day of disaster, the day of disaster, the day of disaster. The first time it's mentioned, it's the day in the English translation. Unfortunately, you don't see it. It just keeps saying the day of disaster. But in the Hebrew, there's a subtle change. The first time is Biyom Edam. Biyom Edam means in the day of their disaster. And then afterwards it goes Biyom Edo, in the day of its or his. So the people refer to singular, or people refer to as a lot of people, them. So the first time it's plural. By making it plural, Edam, Edom, right? Their misfortune rhymes or sounds like echoes the very name of this people that betrayed them. And what kind of betraying is it? They're like like I said before, they're the second, the second string. They're not the ones that actually pull down the walls of Jerusalem. They're not the ones that actually destroy the temple actively. They come in afterwards, right? As it says here, how could you enter the gate on the day of its disaster? Gaze in glee with the others on the day of its disaster. Lay hands on its wealth. So they plunder after everything is destroyed. Oh, then they come in and do the looting. And how could you stand at the passes to cut down its fugitives? Right? People are running away, and that's when you come in. Right? You're not engaged in frontal war with whoever it is that was fighting on the side of Judea. No, after the big guns have come in and defeated the enemy, defeated us, and we're running away, then you come in and you slaughter us. So that's the kind of craven evil that is being thrown at them, and they're accused of being guilty of these kinds of things. Right? How could you betray those who fled? Right? So that's why then Ovadia says, the measure that was done by you will be done to you. As you have done, so shall be done to you. Right? It'll all fall on your head. Okay. Okay, 16.
That same cup that you drank on my holy mount shall all nations drink evermore. Drink till their speech grows thick, and they become as though they had never been. But on Zion's mount a remnant shall survive, and it shall be holy. The house of Jacob shall dispossess those who dispossess them.
Okay, one second, right? So the idea is you all ascended God's mountain, the holy mountain, and you were taking the spoils of the temple, and you were drinking and carousing on the mountain. Well, guess what? That carousing is just going to bring you literally to oblivion, not just to a drunken stupor, but you will eventually just disappear. This will be the sin that will cause your national disappearance. But on Zion's mount, but on that mountain of Zion, of Jerusalem, you will not remain, you will not survive, but Israel will survive. There will be a remnant, and Israel that you try to destroy will continue and remain. Okay, the house of Jacob.
The house of Jacob shall be fire, and the house of Joseph flame, and the house of Esau shall be straw. They shall burn it and devour it, and no survivor shall be left of the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Thus they shall possess the Negev and Mount Esau as well, the Shephelah
Shephelah, that means the
Shephelah
coastal plain.
and Philistia. They shall possess the Ephraimite country and the district of Samaria, and Benjamin along with Gilead. And that exiled force of Israelites shall possess what belongs to the Phoenicians as far as Zarephath, while the Jerusalemite exile community of Sepharad shall possess the towns of the Negev. For liberators shall march up on Mount Zion to wreak judgment on Mount Esau, and dominion shall be the Lord's.
Okay, that's it. That's the whole book of Obadiah. So what do we have as a vision at the end? Right, the people that you have demolished and exiled and slaughtered, they're going to rise up again, and they will be unbeatable. They will be this fire. You will be like straw burnt up by the fire. You will be completely extinguished, and God's people will take over all of your land. They will retake their own territory. They will come back into Jerusalem and reestablish themselves, and that will be the restoration of God's kingdom. Right? And that's the close. V'hayta L'Hashem Mamlucha. By the way, this verse, this last verse, V'yalu Moshim B'har Tzion Lishpot et Har Esav, V'hayta L'Hashem Mamlucha, is a verse, if you look in the note, does it say that in the note? No, it doesn't say it in the note. But if you look in the intro, look at if you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash.
Yeah, what are we looking at here? I'm sorry.
Turn back to 222.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And the second line on the top, which is part of Fishbane's introductory remarks, exemplary in this regard.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
222.
I'm at 222 on the top.
On the top.
Oh, exemplary in this regard is the thematic centrality of
Obadiah. That means Obadiah. Chapter 1, verse 21. That's the last verse, the one that we just read.
Yeah, in Jewish liturgy, because it serves as one of the climatic verses in part of the Rosh Hashanah Musaf service, known as Malchuyot, celebrating and proclaiming God's future kingdom or dominion. The verse also has a climatic presence in the daily morning liturgy, where it occurs at the conclusion of Psuke
de Zimra.
Okay, thank you. An opening selection of biblical psalms and hymns before the call to worship, Baruch. In both contexts, Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 21, is cited along with the prophecy of divine dominion in Zechariah, chapter 14, verse 9. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day, there shall be one Lord with one name.
Right. On that day, the Lord shall be one and God's name one, right? Hashem lamelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu, etc. Right? So these two verses are recited every day in our morning liturgy, because this is the vision of the restoration of God's presence in the world. Jen.
So, I mean, to some extent, for the remaining Edomites who survived, Babylonia, and then had their own, I guess, place in kind of where, I don't know, wherever in Israel or Jordan area, whatever that was, and then into Hellenistic times, because the Remainers were like eventually converted by the Maccabees, yeah, to
Like
Judaism.
The Idumeans,
Yeah, so I mean,
right?
any of us
Idumeans, the
who,
Dome.
if we all, any of us who actually have Jewish ancestry going back far enough could be Edomites, really, or
If you have red
from
hair,
way back.
if you have red hair,
Only if you have red hair, okay.
right? But apparently King David had red hair.
So there you go.
So yeah, correct. So that's part of this like torturous, trek of history that keeps on going. And the wobbly place of Edom as a biologically identifiable ethnic group, which then becomes less and less significant, and they actually do pretty much disappear, whether they disappear into the people of Israel or whether they disappear into the rest of the world. That's different. Different people did different things, but they basically, fade away. And then Edom becomes the concept. Edom becomes the concept of the arch enemy of Israel, whoever that is.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is like, I don't know how to think about this. On the one hand, I like here or in Purim, where like the people who are against us get seriously defeated, right? It makes you feel like there's justice, payback, all of that. On the other hand, it's very troubling. Like, is that really like the default on everything? Is that there's going to be this violent destruction of other people in large groups? And that's what we're saying here is like, I don't, it's hard for me to know how to think about this.
Right. I think it's very disturbing. I think it's what we would like is everybody, that's before we get to that last verse, right? When we say that verse, or when we say which is the verse that is coupled from Ovadia with that verse, when we look at the second paragraph of Aleinu, what we see there is, all the idol worshipers, they'll rethink what their mistakes are. They'll turn their hearts to God, and then on that day, God will be one, and God's name will be one. Right. So there's a vision there, which is a lot less fire and brimstone. It's much more about, people will see the light. Their hearts will soften and turn to God.
So like what happened with Jacob and Esau, like they reconcile. That was
on that individual level, right?
Yes.
But the problem is that if anybody reads history, if anybody reads the newspapers, there are a lot of people out there that are not showing any signs of any time soon softening their hearts, and they do a lot of damage. So that's the struggle. That's the struggle. And how do you, and enough people have been turned into monsters because they wanted to seek that kind of revenge, because they wanted to just like get them, we've had this kind of struggle. What did we do after the war? What did we do after the Shoah? Right? Do we hunt down every Nazi? I don't want to make my life just completely focused on doing that. But on the other hand,
we did.
Well, not we, but some people did.
Some people did.
Some people devoted their lives to making sure that people couldn't hide, which is part of what this Haftorah is about also, right? Those hiding places of yours, they're all going to be uncovered. They're all going to be, you're going to be stripped publicly of any of your, and that begins, of course, that's, a little faint echo of disguise. Jacob disguised himself to get the blessing. You know, the people that ran away to Argentina or this or that or the other thing, or into the US space program, you know, were able to put on another garment. And then the question was, so do we let bygones be bygones? Do we let them, become productive citizens? Very hard question. I'm not saying, I have no guidelines about if it's this way, then yes. If it's that way, then no.
However,
Yeah,
it does do a very, it's very strong description of the evil and the cruelty
right.
that these people were involved with.
So I want to, I want to share with you a text that's a very fascinating text that I think actually speaks about this space in between. The space in between this story that seems to be actually a very heartening story in our Torah reading, in our Torah portion, and then this awful later development. I want to read to you a story that comes into the middle. And first of all, oh, look at that. To everyone, Jen sent this to everyone. Love the blue nails, Beryl. Okay. Got that, Beryl? Did you see it? Did you see that, chat? I just saw it right this second. I didn't see it before. And this is fitting because before we started, we were talking about purple hair. So this is all, it's all good.
It's all
There you
trend
go.
setting.
All right, so I'm
trend
gonna share my screen here. Okay, and this is now you see it, the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees is written around the time of the Maccabees. Jen mentioned before that the Edom is actually the Idumeans are a factor in that whole later development of that story, not the Hanukkah part, but later. But this book is a rewriting of the stories of the Torah through Exodus, and it fills in a lot of stuff. It's like an early midrashic kind of book. And I'm gonna we need to read this real fast. So can somebody do that fast? Okay. Audrey, you have to read it fast though. Chapter
Okay,
37.
I'll do my best. On the day that Isaac, the father of Jacob and Esau, died, 2162 a.m., the sons of Esau.
AM is not a clock time. It means it's the the time of our king or whatever. Go ahead.
Okay. The sons of Esau heard that Isaac had given the portion of the elder to his younger son Jacob, and they were very angry.
So the sons of Esau are angry that their father didn't get the birthright.
Okay. And they strove with their father, saying, "Why has thy father given Jacob the portion of the elder and passed over thee, although thou art the elder and Jacob the younger?" And he said unto them, "Because I sold my birthright to Jacob for a small mess of lentils. And on the day my father sent me to hunt and catch and bring him something that he should eat and bless me, he came with guile and brought my father food and drink. And my father blessed him and put me under his hand. And now our father has caused us to swear, me and him, that we shall
That means
not."
me, Esau, and Jacob have sworn to each other.
And now our father has caused us to swear, me and we shall not mutually devise evil, either against his brother, and that we shall continue in love and in peace, each with his brother, and not make our ways corrupt. And they said unto him, "We shall not hearken unto thee to make peace with him, for our strength is greater than his strength, and we are more powerful than thee. So we shall go against him and slay him and destroy him and his sons. And if thou wilt not go with us, we shall do hurt to thee also."
Oh, so what do we have here? So we have Esau's sons turning on Esau. Esau says, "Look, I made a pledge here. Jacob and I have mutually agreed to make peace with each other. We just want to live in peace with one another as brothers." And it's Esau's sons who says, "We don't want to have anything to do with this. And not only that, we're not going to listen to you. And not only that, if you don't come with us, we'll turn against you." Right? So this is an ancient thinking through of what happened to good old Esau. Why is Esav's reconciliation with his brother not the reality that we know today? And the speculation that we have here is to add this episode into the story, where, yes, if it were up to Esav, of course we would be living in peace with each other. Esav was fine with it. But unfortunately, his descendants were not fine with it. And they weren't accepting his making peace, and they rebelled. This is a rebellion against their own father, right? That's a kind of a kind of a statement of, that's where this evil now takes Esav off the hook, but it's like real evil. This is, the fundamental violation of the mitzvah of honoring your parents and of being, dutiful to your parents and loyal to your parents. This is patricide. This is, we're going to kill you off because you made peace and we don't want to make peace. So this is this kind of like I say, a kind of an imagining of the dynamic that happens between those. Esav was a good guy, but he couldn't pull it off. He couldn't pull it off. The other people that followed him were too hot-headed and they didn't want to listen. And in the end, they force him. We don't have time to read the rest of the story, but now if you want to look it up, it's online, the Book of Jubilees. That's a fascinating document. We've looked at it other times in Torah study. But this is the story that was developed there, that it's not Esav's fault. It's his descendants. His descendants turned around everything that he was trying to accomplish and ruined it. So that's where we're going to leave it for today.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stop sharing. No more sharing. And now I'm going to stop recording.